Welcome to the Alpha Human Podcast. I'm your host, Lawrence Rosenberg, and today's guest is Jeff Struecker. Jeff is a U.S. Army Ranger and a member of the Ranger Hall of Fame who served in 17 combat deployments across 5 different U.S. wars, including the infamous Battle of Mogadishu, which was memorialized in the film Black Hawk Down. Jeff's exemplary service earned him numerous awards, including the prestigious Silver Star for bravery in combat. After leaving active duty, Jeff became a U.S. Army chaplain and continued to serve in various airborne and Ranger units until his retirement in 2011. He holds a PhD in theology and has taught leadership at every level, from undergraduate programs right through to advanced military training. Jeff is also an award-winning author, known for his compelling military thrillers and life stories, with 6 books to his credit. In addition to all this, as if this wasn't enough, he is the founding pastor of Two Cities Church in Columbus, Georgia, and host of the top-rated Unbeatable podcast, which helps people build Army Ranger level resilience. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Lawrence, that was an amazing introduction. Thank you, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. First and foremost, thank you so much for your service.
Oh, it was an honor to do it.
As I was saying before we started recording, you are an inspiration in so many ways, and we'll get into some of that today. But I think we'll dive right in with a quote from a speech you gave at Liberty University back in 2012. I think this kind of sets the tone for some of the stuff we want to get into here, but I'm going to quote you. You said, "I really wanted to transform the world, but there was actually a couple of practical goals that I had when I joined the military. One is that I wanted to see whether or not I had it in me to meet the demands of the toughest assignments in the Army. And I wanted to know if I had what it took to serve among the best of the best." So my first question is, why the drive and desire to prove yourself in this way? Where did that drive, where did that inspiration come from?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of sources, but there's actually a third motivation for going straight to the Army Rangers.
Okay.
I didn't know a lot about the military, and I didn't come from a military family, so nobody was really steering me in this direction. In fact, when I announced that I was going to join the military, I had already turned 18. I was in high school. I had, just had my 18th birthday signed up. And it was a couple of months before I even bothered to mention it to anybody because my mother did not take the news well. She was very, very upset with me for joining the military. But I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to get, an opportunity for a better future. I was looking for that in the military.
Mhm.
And honestly, you can't say this out loud because people are going to think you're crazy. But I also wanted to go to combat. I wanted to be in a unit that had a chance if there was going to be a combat operation. I wanted to be in a unit that would go to combat because I wanted to know if I was ready to meet death.
Mm.
And if you tell an Army recruiter that while you're in the recruiter's office, they're going to send you away in a straitjacket. So the one of the motivations for all of this was just because of my fear, my terror of dying that I struggled with for most of my childhood.
Well, that's interesting because those who have such a fear, uh, those who build up that kind of terror in their mind, the last thing they want to do is run towards it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, how do you decide that the way to maybe conquer this is to get face to face with it?
Yeah.
And by the way, I should say, I mean, I've interviewed many special operators, and I think one of the big differentiators among those in those elite outfits like yourself is that they actually do seek out combat. And I'm not sure if they all are going through what maybe you went through as a young man, but I'm real curious about, again, most people have fears of role. Yeah, the I guess the psychological advantage of dealing with something like that is to go towards it. But at such a young age, how did you even realize that
Yeah.
that's what you should do?
I want to explain myself a little bit more to the audience. I wasn't looking for war. I wasn't asking for war. But if the United States was going to end up in war, I wanted to be in the unit that had a guarantee. Kind of, it would be at the forefront of the war. The pointy end of the spear is what we used to say.
Okay.
Um, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. So let me explain where this fear comes from.
Okay.
I didn't grow up in a Christian home. In fact, I grew up about as far away from Christianity as you could get because not only was my family, not only did they not have any very strong faith, but all of the people in my life didn't. And so I wrestled with life and death. I wrestled with big questions and I wrestled with the afterlife. And I remember being an elementary age child, and I'm talking 8, 9, 10 years old, almost, uh, regularly at night, waking up and just terrified about the prospects of what happens to you after you die, because there's no one in my life that has any answers to these questions.
Okay.
And I wrestled with this personally for a long, long time, and it haunted me. It haunted me day after day for years. And then when I was 13 years old, my neighbors came by to talk to me. Now, we just moved to a little apartment complex in another town, and there was a young married couple that lived across the street from us.
Hmm.
And that couple was a Christian couple that started to hang out with me and they played games with me. And after a couple of months of getting to know me, they came over to my house one night. It was just me and my little sister alone, and they said, "Can we talk to you about something?" And in that conversation, they talked to me about life, about death, about Jesus, about sin, about how you can be radically changed. And that night, God totally and radically changed my life. Now, I was 13 years old at the time.
Okay.
And when I woke up the next day, I was totally aware that something significant had happened. I don't know what it is, can't put it into words, but something radical just happened to me. And then it started to occur to me that paralyzing fear of death, I don't I don't think I have it anymore. And I don't wake up in the middle of the night in a sweat wondering about what happens to you. So for the next few years, I'm just trying to figure out, like, am I really over this thing? How do you know that you're over a fear of death? And so for me, I'm just a simple guy. Logically, I guess you got to go put yourself in a life or death situation. I'm not going to jump out of an airplane without a parachute.
Right.
Maybe in the military, I get shot at and I find out once and for all. And for me, it was a genuine question. Am I really over this terrifying fear of death? And that's why I wanted to not only join the Army, but join special operations and become an Army Ranger.
Wow. Wow. To go all through to go through such a thing at such a young age, that's really incredible, but also powerful. How the answer to it came in the form of uh, the Savior.
Yeah.
How it came in the form of Christ, and how He steered those people into your life
Yeah.
to help you. I mean,
Nothing.
it's just
It's nothing short of a miracle that I ended up neighbors to this couple, and they spoke to me the answer to a question I've been wrestling with for years and couldn't find an answer.
mm, mm. Okay. Well, speaking of facing death, you got your wish because you were involved in the Battle of Mogadishu, right? I mean, that is um, if anyone's read Black Hawk Down or seen the film Black Hawk Down, uh, or even if they haven't, they've certainly it's certainly come up in videos, in lookbacks on the news. It was really a tumultuous moment in modern history. During that incident, you were, if I'm correct, a 24-year-old squad leader,
That's right. Yep.
and at some point, you were You were convinced that you were going to die. So I'm going to quote you here because this is exactly, I mean, your greatest fear is coming true, right?
Right.
Because here's the quote from, I've heard you talk about this, so I'm going to quote you. My platoon leader said, there's been a Black Hawk helicopter shot down. Get your men, go back into the city. And I thought to myself, there is no way I can go back out there. I thought, God, I'm going to die tonight. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was no way to survive the situation. And yet you did survive, but can you take us through what led up to that moment
Yeah.
and how you overcame it? What you
Sure.
went through psychologically and
Yeah.
physically.
And by the way, you've just described it perfectly for the audience. In fact, those are my words.
Okay.
When I got sent back into the city streets the second time, and just so that everybody knows, I went back and forth in and out of the city streets multiple times and stayed out there until the next morning, literally the last vehicle to come back in the next day. When I was going back out into the city streets, getting ordered back out there, I had enough combat experience to know this is 100% certain death. Now, I should explain this. I showed up to the Army and went straight to the Ranger Regiment as a private. I was an infantryman, and the Ranger Regiment in the United States Army is a special operations unit that's basically deployed all over the world. Literally, the only force that showed up at the beginning of the global war on terrorism and didn't leave for the next 20 years. For 20 years consecutively, there was one unit that was fighting the war on terrorism and never came home completely for 20 years, and it was the
Well,
Army's Ranger Regiment. Um, in 1989, well, I guess I should go back just a little bit. When I showed up to the Army, we were at a period of relative peace, and there was very, very few people who had served in combat at all. In fact, people use language like, if you ever go to war in your entire Army career, here's what it might be like. Well, by the time I'd been in the Army for a couple of years, the U.S. invaded the Republic of Panama in Operation Just Cause. The Ranger Regiment started that invasion. I showed up to Panama. I got in firefights. I moved body bags. I experienced the full range of combat in my first couple of years in the Army. Fast forward a year later, and the United States is involved in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm in Kuwait. I went over to Kuwait with the Ranger Regiment, got in a firefight over there. So when I get to Somalia, I know combat. And although I'm only 24 years old and a squad leader, I know combat more than guys that have been in the Army for 20 years. So we roll out onto this target. It's another mission, but it's not a routine mission because it's daring. It's a daring daylight raid is what we would say in military terms.
okay.
It's daylight, it's the middle of bad guy territory. There's no support. There's no, we have no close air support or any, U.S. forces that can come in and back us up. No aircraft over our heads, no naval gunfire in the seas. It's us. And then one or two U.S. Army units, U.S. military units that are part of the United Nations. They don't work with us, but they're in the area.
And this is in Somalia.
That's right. Now I'm in Somalia. I'm a 24-year-old squad leader. We're doing this mission to go get a couple of bad guys. And this is the events of Black Hawk Down. Um, and when we roll into the target, I'm under gunfire, but I'm under gunfire that's far enough over my head that honestly, I'm not really that worried. Been shot at enough to know, okay, that fire is not that accurate. Therefore, it's not that deadly. Keep doing your job. Within a few minutes, one of the Rangers is critically wounded because he fell out of the Black Hawk helicopter, missed a fast rope, and landed on his head. So I get dispatched to take this guy back, and I'm trying to fight my way back to our base and drop him off with our surgeon when my vehicles get ambushed and the guy who's sitting behind me gets shot in the head and killed instantly. Now, this is the first guy from the entire force that's KIA. And the fight that I went through just to get back to the base was so intense that quite honestly, all of us should have been dead. We were outnumbered 100 to 1, and most of the fight was within 10 feet of us.
Wow.
So we finally make it back to the base. And as you just described, my boss tells me there's actually a second Black Hawk that's gone down. I didn't even know any of this because I was literally overwhelmed by the gunfire and fighting for my life. And my platoon leader, Lieutenant Larry Moore, said, we've already put the search and rescue force in. Like the last of our force has already gone in where the first helicopter crashed. Now a second Black Hawk has gone down and we don't have anybody left. So Jeff, we need to get back on the Humvees and I need you to roll out there to the Durant, to the crash site where Mike Durant's helicopter crashed.
Wow.
My vehicles are shot to pieces. I've got a dead body on in the back of my Humvee, blood everywhere. And as I start to prepare myself and my men for going out to the second crash site, this is where I start to think like a tactician and like an army warrior. I know the enemy. I know our capabilities. I know what I just went through. This is 100% certain we are all going to die. But if you don't drive out into the city streets, there's no chance that the crew of that Black Hawk will survive. If you do go out into those city streets, all of us are going to die. There's no way around this thing. It's a lot of people are going to die tonight. And I had to personally get to the point of saying, Jeff, you made a commitment to your Ranger buddies. And it's actually a creed that we say to one another. We recite the Ranger Creed and we do it almost every day, the very first thing out of the very first thing in the day before we even work out and get the day started. And reciting the Ranger Creed is literally a pledge of our lives to each other. Because that Ranger Creed says, I'll never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And I'm thinking to myself, if I drive back out there, this is 100% certain, not me, but all of my men. So I'm thinking about my men first and about myself second, but it's 100% certain all of us are going to die. I don't know if anybody survived at those two crash sites, but I do know this. The only guy who's been killed in action was shot in the head about 12 inches away from me, and we're all going to die tonight. And there's no amount of military training that can prepare you for that kind of intensity. Like, sure, the military teaches you how to respond in a crisis. They teach you how to respond appropriately to a technical or a tactical scenario, but nothing can prepare you for this kind of emotional and spiritual challenge.
Mm.
And this is moments where my faith took over. And I don't really even have the right words to say because I don't think the human language can adequately describe this, but I just surrendered the next 24 hours to God. I know I'm going to die. Don't let me do anything stupid. Whatever happens next, God, I'm placing myself, my men, my future in your hands. And during that moment, I just got this sense of supernatural peace. Now, other guys may say, oh, God gave you some promise that you were going to survive. But for me, it was actually the exact opposite. Like what I felt is, okay, Jeff, tonight's the night. You are probably going to die, but you don't have to worry about what happens to you next. We have settled that. You've nailed all of that down when you were 13 years old. So all you need to do is go out into those city streets and do your job because eternity has already been dealt with. And man, that was like somebody just took a huge rock out of my backpack when I remembered, you've already nailed all of that down. Eternity's already settled. Now just go out and do your job and don't worry about what happens
Mm.
next. And for the rest of that fight, I could go back out into the streets again and again. And I had genuinely no fear of death because I knew I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die in the next few moments, and I already know what's waiting for me after I die. So, what do I got to worry about?
Well, I mean, you talk about you talk about how that miracle happened when you were 13 and how those people came into your life and how you had that question settled uh, to then be in this situation and rely on that and now be able to do what many would not have been able to do. And you having had that experience, the thing the thing would have been that your men who had to come with you, they didn't have that
Yeah. Yeah.
experience. So, and I know because again, I've listened to you before, I've done my research. I know they were terrified, just as terrified as you.
Oh man. Yeah.
What did you tell them?
Yeah, my greatest honor in life, besides the woman that I married and the children that we had, is the men that I had the chance to serve with throughout my military career. And there are a couple of guys in those streets in Somalia that were far braver than I am, and they will go down in my mind as some of the bravest acts I've ever seen in my life. And I've read all the history books. Some of the greatest acts I've ever heard about or read about don't compare to what some of those guys did. Ultimately, they rolled out into the city streets because their buddies needed them. And all of them rolled out of there feeling the same way. Like, that's it. I'm going to die, but there's no way around it. And I don't think this is morbidity. Part of being a warrior is recognizing I hope it never happens, but when I signed up and pledged my oath, I made a promise. And if that promise cost me my life, I'm going to give it if that's what my country needs me to do. So I think really what motivated those guys to go back out in the city streets is not the flag. It's
Mhm.
not, the awards and stuff like that. It's I love the men that are out in those city streets enough that I'm willing to give my life up just so that they have a chance to go back home to their families. And
Yeah,
I've seen that on battlefields all over the world. That's the only thing that makes a guy or a gal willing to willingly lay their life down in combat.
yeah, that's impactful because what else is going to do it? I've also heard you talk, so I think this dovetails into some questions I have on managing that fear because you've actually done a series of videos on how to face fear. You're an expert on it, clearly, having gone through such a thing. And you talk about three fears that one faces when they're in combat. And so I'd like to drill down on that and better understand because you mentioned one of them, which seemed to have been the main reason everyone was able to get back out there, and that was, your buddies. But there's actually a fear when it comes to your comrades, your mates, the guys you work side by side with. That's actually a particular fear. But there's two other ones. Can you
Yeah,
kind of talk
sure.
about?
Well, I want to say to the audience out there, listen, there's nothing special about me. And honestly, although I got a chance to work with some of the bravest people on the planet, I experienced the same kind of fears that any human being would experience in those circumstances. And I'm not an expert in a whole lot, but I know a lot more than the average guy about death and about fear. So you nailed that one, Lawrence. And I just happen to know it because I've been around people that are in the most intense fears. And now, when I go speak to audiences, inevitably people will come up and talk to me about their experience. And it's not their combat experience, like, let me tell you this disease, or let me tell you what happened to my family, or let me tell you this natural disaster that I went through. So I still get the privilege of hearing stories all the time about how people face their fears and how they came out stronger on the other side. The guys that I was with, they all have a healthy respect for the enemy. But if we're honest, let's just call it what it is. It's a fear that enemy is well armed. They are far more, they far outnumber us. And any warrior on a battlefield that doesn't fear, and I'm using the word fear and respect now as synonyms, that doesn't respect your enemy and their ability to do violence to you, you have no business being on the battlefield. Now, hopefully you vastly outnumber them. You have better equipment, better training. The situation is all designed so that you're gonna win, but you have no business even taking a step onto the battlefield if you don't have this healthy reverence, respect, or fear of what the enemy can do. And all of us did. We had a very acute awareness of what the enemy can do to us. Now, most of the Rangers that I was with had no combat experience and they had heard their whole lives, like, you guys are 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And so they kind of felt like Superman until
Mhm.
the first guy gets killed right in front of you. And that's the moment that everybody realizes, uh-oh, this is bad and it could be me next. And I think everyone in Somalia hit that moment. Everyone in the fight in Somalia hit that moment really early on in those 18 hours. So there's a fear of the enemy.
Mhm.
There is a fear of letting down your country, the mission, the unit, your commanders. And that fear right there shows that you're part of something really important, that you're part of something that's bigger than yourself. And I would say even bigger than human life. The fear of the enemy shouldn't come first. I don't even think fear of failing the mission should come first. If you read the accounts of all of those awards for valor, especially the medals of honor that were uh, the people that received medals of honor, almost every single account says the same thing. It's their love for the people that they served with that caused them to do, in Medal of Honor terms, to go above and beyond the call of duty. And the fear, the third fear, and in my opinion, the most powerful, and therefore the fear that always should be the one that ultimately drives your actions, is the fear of letting down the people that you love. And
Mm.
if they expect me to fight my way to them, if they expect me to die and give Abraham Lincoln's words, the last full measure of devotion just to get to them, I won't let my buddies down. I will gladly die in these dusty city streets before I let my buddies down. And that fear should be foremost. And it should be the number one fear, the fear that motivates everything else, because it's actually a fear that comes from love, the love of your brothers and sisters in arms. And you can do some pretty incredible things because of the fear of the enemy. You'll do some pretty amazing things because of the fear of, the letting your boss down, or the mission,
Mhm.
failing the mission. But the fear of letting down the guys and gals that you love, that fear will cause you to do far more than the other two will.
So, you're going to face, as you did early on, and certainly uh, in Somalia, in no uncertain terms, the fear of death, the fear of the enemy, the fear of letting your buddies down. Um, I'm curious, given how impactful that can be, would you just describe there, the number one fear, the number one driver that should reign overall. Are these fears ever discussed with new recruits when
Uh,
training for combat?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, the US military doesn't toss the word love around very often, but the other language, that that language really is a substitute for love.
Hmm.
And the kind of relationships that warriors develop, the bond that's developed during hardships and suffering and dangers of combat, almost every warrior that I know would say those relationships are far deeper and more meaningful to me than my own blood relationships that I have had for my entire life. And it's because of the deep love that we developed for each other. And
Hmm.
although we didn't use the words, everybody knows that's what it is.
Right.
Um, so yeah, you're not going to find two big tough warriors on the battlefield talking about how much they love you, man. But if you listen to the language, anybody, you don't have to even know who they are. Anybody can hear what they're saying to one another without using the word is "I love you."
Right. Without question, that'll fill you with the stuff necessary to get through,
Yeah.
and you're only gonna learn that when life's on the line, or in dire circumstances. Uh, and I doubt a recruiter would ever talk about all the
No,
fears.
that's not going to be part of the fine print.
No way,
But I guess
right? There
Lawrence,
was
if I can interrupt for a second, I want the listeners to hear, like, this isn't only found in combat. This is the same thing that makes somebody avoid temptation, or
Mm,
say no to, doing something that they know would let their friends down. This is the reason why you don't embezzle. This is the cause that prevents you from doing the thing that you think I could probably get away with and nobody would know. But if anybody ever found out, it would devastate my friends or it would devastate my family. So I'm just not going to do that thing because of your love. And the love is, and I'm not trying to use negative terms here.
right.
Fear, the healthy fear of letting them down is an incredibly powerful force for good in everybody's life all the time. You
Well,
just may not think about it in those terms.
you're right. You're right. That is, yeah, wise words. Um, so okay, so how did you go from the drive to engage in combat and being in all, being through everything you've been through? How do you then decide to become a chaplain? Like what
Yeah.
led to that
Yeah.
transition?
Yeah, that transition was rough. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it, and I didn't see it coming.
Okay.
But immediately after the fight in Somalia, my buddies started coming up to me and asking me questions about what I believe. Now, I'd been very open with them about my faith the whole time I was a Ranger sergeant, but a lot of them were genuinely struggling and I mean really broken about what just happened. And many of them were asking questions about the meaning of life and about life after death. In fact, some of them were asking me immediately after the battle the very same questions that I was asking my family at 8 or 10 years old. Like, what happens to you after you die? And what is it like? Because I might get on a helicopter tomorrow and I'm not ready. And there was a moment in Somalia, I never saw this one coming. It was out of the blue, totally out of the blue,
Mhm.
where I was standing on the airfield where our base was, and we were all living in this airplane hangar. And there was a moment that I felt this overwhelming sense from God. And I've never really heard an audible voice from God, but this was as clear as anything in my life. There was a moment where I felt God just revealed to me, Jeff, you were able to have peace last night because you have settled eternity. A lot of your buddies, they haven't settled it, and they're really, really struggling. And then I just felt it as clear as anything in my life. I felt him say, Jeff, I want you to help them with their eternity. Everything in my military career up to that point has been helping America's warriors get ready to meet the enemy. And now I feel God saying, I want you to get them ready to meet eternity. So I came back home and I talked to my pastor and my chaplain and told them both. Well, I asked them, like, how would you even know if God wants you to be in ministry? And both of them were dumbfounded by it. And then I came home to my wife, we're high school sweethearts, and I said, completely out of the blue, I think God is calling me into the ministry. And she said, no, I don't want that. And I said, I don't think I want it either, but I also don't think we get a choice in this. Like, I think he's saying this is what's next. Whether you like it or not, go do it. And so I would have never chosen this. I had no desire to do this, and there was never an indication that
Wow.
this is what my future held. And it was a complete curveball. And it all happened in an instant after that fight was over with, literally the next day.
Okay. So then, you retire, you come home and you end up, not knowing all of the story in between then and now, but certainly outside of the military, you're a founding pastor at Two Cities Church. And so now maybe there's a number of veterans amongst the flock, but um, for those who attend your services and listen to you preach and come to your church, how do your comp because you bring a very unique perspective,
Yeah.
right, to the ordinary citizen, because most of the priests and the pastors and the men of God who are in our lives that we go to for counsel and instruction, they haven't been through what you've
Yeah.
been
Right.
through. So how has your combat experiences
Sure.
influenced your approach to ministry?
Yeah, I'll give the very short version of what happens next and then answer your question.
Okay.
I had no college education because I joined the Army while I was still in high school. So I started working on school on my own time, stayed in the Army, eventually did an undergraduate degree, and then I went off to seminary and got a theological education, spent some time working at a church, and came back in the Army as a chaplain and did 10 more years as an Army chaplain, most of those 10 years going to Afghanistan and Iraq. And then I retired from the Army in 2011. And I spent almost my whole Army career in one duty station. That's the headquarters of the Army Rangers is in Fort Moore, Georgia. That's where I live right now. Excuse me. And when it came time to retire, I asked my wife, we're high school sweethearts. Do you want to move back to our hometown? Where do you want to go next? And she said, we've spent almost our whole lives here. Why would we go anywhere else? Let's just stay here. And secretly, I wanted to stay in this area because I've never forgot this call of God on my life to minister to America's military, even if that means when I'm a 75 or 85-year-old man, if God is still around or God has left me around, then I plan to keep ministering to the military as much as they'll let me
Okay.
because I've never forgot this. So we started a church about 5 years ago, and we don't intentionally recruit out of the military. We don't actually advertise from the military. We just spend, me and a couple of other guys spend a lot of time on the military base, meeting with the military when they're out in training and ministering to them now as old retirees. We call ourselves graybeards because we've got some gray in our beard. And as a result, we have a huge number of military that come to our church, but it's very natural and kind of organic. It's not intentional. And obviously, some of that is because many of them recognize me from the movie Black Hawk Down. But that may make somebody show up one time. That doesn't get
Right.
them to stick around. I hope that they see there's something different about you guys when they come to our church. And what's different is you genuinely care about me, even though I'm only going to be here for 3 weeks and then I'm going to move away and I'll never ever see you again. Why would you care about me when other pastors are like, I got so much on my plate that I can't pour into somebody who's only going to be around for 3 years or 3 months? And we are at a training base. So we give everything that we've got to somebody who's only with us for 3 weeks or 3 months because we know we won't get them for 3 years. So
Wow.
if I get you for 3 weeks or for 3 months or for 3 years, whatever it is, we're going to give you everything that we've got. And I hope that's what's bringing them back.
Mm. I yeah, that's amazing because most pastors are gonna be part of a community where these people will be around for 3 years, maybe forever. Um, and again, I think that your perspective, having seen what you've seen and ministering to the warriors amongst our society brings a very unique perspective to those who can learn so much, even though they haven't been
Yeah,
in the military. And what's interesting is that the military is the only public organization, really en masse that hires chaplains.
right.
Industry doesn't, right? Public schools don't. Don't get me wrong. You might find a public school, I don't know, maybe somewhere. You might find a large company somewhere that has strong Christian roots. Maybe they have a chaplain or a pastor on staff. I know healthcare does, hospitals do, some hospitals, but for the most part, really it's the military. And a question I've always thought that, if the toughest, bravest, most courageous among us who are willing to put their lives on the line, our nation's soldiers and combat vets, if they need God's guidance, and
Absolutely.
certainly
Yeah.
the rest of us do. What do you think we often? Why do you think that the strongest among us end up seeking God? You would think students and business professionals would have just as much need,
Yeah.
right, for Christ
Yeah.
as
Sure.
our nation's warriors.
Yeah. Well, just to explain chaplaincy a little bit. There are some chaplains that work in corporations,
Okay,
corporate chaplains. There are chaplains that work in prisons. We call them corrections chaplains. There are chaplains that work for
that's right.
sports
Yes.
teams. And then there are chaplains, of course, that work in healthcare, as well as law enforcement and EMS, first responders often will have chaplains as well.
Hmm.
But the overwhelming vast majority of chaplains serve in the military. All of the rest of them collectively don't even get close to the numbers that serve in the military.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons why you have so many people that have such deep faith in the military is because you're confronted with your mortality early on, right? If you play football in the NFL, or if you're on an ambulance, or if you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, everybody in the back of their mind knows I'm going to die someday. But for most human beings, we feel like that someday is going to be 75 years from now. And I don't even have to think about it. In the military, you start thinking about it like on day one in the military, and you keep thinking about it almost every day. So obviously, you have to process as uh, a young and new to the military, you have to process your own mortality in ways that many people don't ever have to do until they're literally old and on their deathbed with a terminal diagnosis in a hospital room. That's one of the reasons why the military has some of these incredibly strong men and women
Mm.
who are also deeply devout because they've wrestled with their mortality, and all of them have come to the same conclusion. I am not big enough to beat death. Is there anything out there that can help me beat death? And the answer to that question is yes, there is one person out there. His name is Jesus Christ. He has beat death, and he will beat death for you if you'll
Right.
allow him to.
No, no question about it. It's certainly that's certainly the justification for the numbers. Uh, it's just you start to think about how how important having God in our lives
Yeah,
is now, not just when you're at the moment where it's all going to end. You start to realize that, you know, just all human behavior, all human action, everything we go through in this life before we get, to the kingdom of God, is so much of it would would find value in having that counsel, that that ministry, that where a pastor can lend some insight and
yeah,
advice into morality, ethics, what's right, what's wrong, how to stay on the path. And it just seems like a big loss that organizations, that every major
right.
corporation and every major educational institution does not have
Yeah,
a chaplain. But
yeah,
nevertheless, so this is where I want to, because you provide, actually, you're providing this type of guidance, with your book, and that's what I want to dive into. Your book
sure.
Start Here,
Yeah,
uh, why Jesus came and how his message gives you life. So I have a question for you to kick this off. Uh, and so of course, chapter one, you never outgrow your need for the gospel. I'm going to quote you. So you say, apart from Jesus, we are worthless. Apart from what Jesus did for us on the cross, we are helpless. Apart from the resurrection that raised that dead man to life again, we are lifeless. As such, we never graduate from learning how much we need the gospel. So
yeah,
my question is, our view of books and texts on the big subjects, philosophy, science, technology, it's to gain an understanding of the subject so that we can effectively know and use that information. We read to attain that knowledge, and then we move on to more complex, advanced thoughts, ideas, concepts. We then graduate from one understanding to the next level of instruction, so to speak. Not so with the gospel. Why is that?
yeah. Great question. So one of the reasons I wrote this book is because I want people to understand when you hear the word faith in the English language in America, oftentimes most of us don't really understand what that word means in the Bible. right? So we typically take an assumption that the word faith means I understand a set of facts and I believe those facts to be true. And that's what I experienced with a lot of people in the military. When I started talking to them about my personal faith, about the relationship that I have with Jesus and how it's radically changed me, they're like, oh, yeah, I get that. I understand that. I believe that to be true. So I'm good, right? And my answer is no, actually, you're not good. That's not even close to good enough. In fact, there's a verse in the book of James in the Bible,
Mhm.
James chapter 1, verse 19, that describes how that alone cannot possibly be enough because James says, if you believe that there is a God, good for you. I'm paraphrasing this.
Yes.
Even the demons believe that, and at least they tremble at the name of God. And what James is saying is just accepting a set of facts is not good enough because the demons accept those same facts to be true. So, what I mean by this statement, you're not smart enough, you're not strong enough, you're not wise enough, you're not fast enough, and you will never, ever be good enough, is that you and I could never earn on our own merits. It doesn't matter how much time you spend, it doesn't matter how hard you study. You could never figure it out on your own. And God knew that. That's why He sent His Son Jesus to rescue us. So, what lots of people do is they treat religion, and I'm using religion right now as a bad word, not a good word. They
Okay.
treat a set of religious principles like do these things and your God will accept you, your God will love you. That's what religion is in a nutshell. They treat religion as I'm a bad person, religion makes me a better person. And I'm saying, no, 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 that's not how it works in the Bible. In the Bible, you are a dead person, and dead people cannot do anything from themselves. In fact, this is the exact language that the Bible uses in Ephesians chapter 2. Only somebody who makes the dead alive again could make it possible for you to be good, for you to be worthy, for you to be, acceptable in God's sight. So the difference between genuine faith in the Bible and religion
Mhm.
is religion tries to make bad people better. Faith in the Bible takes dead people and makes them alive. And if I can just describe the difference now with the word faith in the Bible, when we hear faith, even people that have gone to church all their lives, they think, okay, I accept the facts that there was a guy by the name of Jesus. He lived a long time ago. I even believe that he died on a cross and that he came out of the tomb again. I accept that those facts might be true. But for them, Jesus is no different than George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. Just some dude I read about in a book. I know he actually lived because there's enough evidence to back it up. So I believe all of those facts to be true. That's good enough, right? And my answer is no, man, that's not good enough, not even close to good enough. You see, the way that the Bible uses faith is you have to be willing to bet your life on those facts. And because I spent almost my entire career jumping out of airplanes and with people jumping out of airplanes, I said the best way to describe it is this: you can put a parachute on your back, get in an airplane, fly around with the doors open, and swear to me until you're blue in the face that you believe that this parachute will rescue you. But you really haven't put faith in the parachute until you step out of the airplane. And really, what the Bible calls people to do is step out of the airplane and put that kind of faith in Jesus. It is a radical, total, desperate trust in Jesus. And when you've done that, he's no longer some guy you read about in a book. He's a real person that I met personally, and I know him intimately, and he has taken me from dead to alive. And now I have an intimate relationship with him, which is very different than quote religion.
Yeah, so so a lot of people treat, as you said, they treat it as a book. Um, right, they treat the gospel as a text.
Yeah, like a set of facts that if as long as I believe these facts are true, I'm good, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes so much sense.
And that's
Um,
really one of the reasons for the book Start Here is I'm trying to help people say, okay, what you might have heard in a church before is a set of facts. Just because you've accepted those facts to be true doesn't mean that you've actually started the relationship with God. The first step in that relationship with God is stepping out of the airplane and seeing that the parachute really does open. And by the way, I'll make 100% guarantee to you, the parachute will really open, but you have to take the step out of the airplane to prove it, or before it'll ever happen.
So the first, so to get someone there, I think you do a really good job in the chapter on the gospel is the four-lane bridge to God.
Yeah.
I think because you have to get people to, all right, so it's not just a book, it's not just a text, not just a set of facts. I, you know, so let's get, there's a reason it's called the word, right? The way, the truth, and the life.
Right.
So can you describe what you mean when you talk about a
Yeah,
four-lane
sure.
bridge to God?
Yeah, if it's fascinating that the early Christians, they didn't call themselves Christians. In fact, the language that they chose for themselves after Jesus left earth and went back to heaven is they called themselves followers of the way. Now, obviously, that's coming directly from Jesus's quote about himself in John chapter 14 when he says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And he didn't say, I know the way or I can show you the way. He said, I am the way. But what's fascinating to me is of all of the statements that Jesus made about himself, they chose this statement for themselves. We are followers of the way.
Mm,
And I use this analogy. I don't even know that it's unique to me, but the analogy is the way is like a four-lane bridge, right?
okay.
And there's two lanes of yours and two lanes of God on this four-lane bridge. Any four-lane road has two lanes going in one direction and two lanes going in the other direction. There is my brokenness and my sin that cannot be fixed on my own. That's part of what needs to be dealt with on this four-lane bridge. So God says, I'm going to take that sin and all of those mistakes that you've ever made, Jeff, and I'm going to take it away from you completely. And God does on his lane, he removes my sin from me. Now, that's only part of the equation. That would be a two-lane road.
Right.
And if you take people that are morally broken and you take away their moral brokenness, now they're just morally neutral. There's nothing good that you can say about them. You just don't have anything bad to say about them. So the other two lanes are I cannot do anything on my own and of my own ability to impress God, please God, or earn God's favor. But Jesus already has. He already did. And God will give me credit for Jesus's perfect righteousness. Literally, give in my account all that Jesus did on his lifetime on earth. He's going to give me credit for that. So Jesus takes all of my crap, and then God gives me all of the credit for all of the things that Jesus did. And the other two lanes, of course, are my inability to be righteous on my own. And God says, I know you can't do it on your own. So I'm going to give you credit now for something that you didn't do and you don't deserve. But because of my son, Jesus, I'm going to give credit to you anyway. And now you stand not morally neutral in front of God, but you stand morally perfect in front of God. No longer a sinner, not even morally neutral, now morally perfect. And it's 100% because of what Jesus did and 0% because of what Jeff did. That's what I mean by this four-lane bridge. When they called themselves the way, I don't know this, but I think that might have been what was on their mind, choosing that as a name for themselves.
Yeah. It's powerful to think of what they called themselves, so that first generation, um, followers of the way. It's very powerful to think about that. Um, and your description there kind of leads me into this question I have, because I think, I personally, for instance, I feel this because when you're told, or when I mean, because I know um, that you're being given credit for something that you've had no part in, and you're being given that credit for
Yeah.
it. Um, when I think about what Christ went through, I mean, my heart breaks. I mean, I
Oh,
feel
yeah.
right
Yeah.
when you actually spend time ruminating on from the moment he was handed over
Hmm.
by the Sanhedrin and handed over to the Roman authorities. If you really play it out, in your mind, everything that he went through, your heart breaks. And I'll feel guilty, ashamed. I feel not worthy based on all of the sinfulness of my life, of the immense, immeasurable sacrifice that he made so that I can be forgiven. You know, on the one hand, I have like a deep seated sorrow when I think about that for the incomprehensible suffering he endured, while at the very same time, an indescribable joy
Yeah.
for having his salvation, for being reborn and having his love and his light uh, within my heart. And so it's so when I go deep into
Yeah.
prayer, which I do daily, as I ruminate on the gospel and the word, I often end up realizing how unworthy I am of his sacrifice. And I don't think that pain and anguish is ever going to be washed away completely. And I'm not sure it should be or that I wanted to,
Right.
lest I take the sacrifice and salvation for granted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope for everybody that's listening right now, they're hearing your words, Lawrence, because this should be true of every Christian. We should all have this utter shame for what we've done. And then at the same time, this unimaginable celebration, this incredible joy of what God did that we know we absolutely don't deserve, and yet He did it for us anyway. And those two things we should have kind of at the same time,
Okay.
which is not, it's not just you, not just me. That's the way every Christian should feel when you properly understand what it means to be a follower of the way.
Amazing, because you literally just answered my question, which the follow-up was, is that mindset necessary? And now
Yeah,
you've just answered.
necessary. I think it's absolutely the essence of Christianity, like almost embarrassed at what God has given me because I know I don't deserve it. Like, God, you did too much because I don't deserve any of what you did, let alone the death of your son on the cross for me. It's too much to
Yeah.
even wrap your mind around.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not alone. So, um, so that dovetails into um, one of your other chapters in the book, which is the cost that one pays to follow Christ. So in the book, you tell a story about when you were a chaplain,
Yeah,
well, a chaplain candidate. You were working in
yeah,
basic training battalion. You were asked to preach a chapel service,
right.
like 200 guys in a tiny little chapel that was only capable of seating maybe
About
150.
90. Yep.
90. Okay. So it was obviously overflowing. And after preaching the gospel, you asked the men in the room who among them were ready for Jesus to change them. And like a quarter of
Yeah,
the place floods the stage, and you're like, whoa, wait a second, everyone go back to your
that's right.
seats,
I literally sent them back to their seats. Yep.
because they must have misunderstood for so many to just jump like that. Can you describe what they failed to grasp?
Yeah,
Because I believe
sure.
therein lies not a cost, but what I would call an investment needed to
Yeah.
follow Christ.
And I want to say what you're describing absolutely took place. And that moment that tons of people came forward, I felt like I have failed. Like, uh-oh, I said something wrong because if you properly understood what I was
You,
inviting you to, you wouldn't run down these aisles. So I sent them back to their seats and I said, guys, let me explain it to you this way. What Jesus is asking is, are you willing to give up everything? Your family, your future, your fortune. Literally, you have no more you have no more authority in your own life. He calls the shots every minute of the day from here on out. Are you willing to make that kind of surrender to Jesus? Because if not, don't get out of your seats and come back down the aisle again. And I'll never forget it. I at that moment spelled out the cost of the gospel. Jesus says, I have given everything, not everything that I could, but literally everything that ever could be given up for you. And in return, I expect you to be willing to. You don't, I may not ask it, but you must be willing to give up everything and follow me. He even says, quite literally, anybody who's not willing to leave father and brother and sister and your spouse and even your own life, you're not worthy of me. So I said to those guys in that chapel, anybody who's willing to say, I'm giving it everything, all of it, anything he wants, whatever it is, 100%, it's all his right now. And 19 guys out of those 200 got up and walked back down the aisles. And I said, okay, now for you 19, we can talk. The whole room went forward when they didn't understand the cost. But when I explained the cost and those 19 came forward, I am absolutely convinced those 19 got it. And they were saying, it's worth it. I hate to use, normal human language here, but what those guys were saying is, I understand the trade and the trade is worth it. Giving my life and everything that I have is worth what I gain in receiving Christ and all that he's offering. And those guys got it.
So, yeah, well, it's still amazing that they were even 19,
Yeah.
but
Only
you're
God
like,
can do something like that.
yeah. So, okay, so then, there's something else that comes with the ability to be one of those 19, because you can't do that unless you're a true believer, unless you
That's
believe,
right.
right? So, uh, how, because then that leads to a bigger question, which is, how does one find belief? Because if someone comes to you as their pastor and says they wish they could believe, because the idea of Christ and his salvation, the idea of the way, the idea of the word sounds amazing, and they would follow Christ if only they had faith, if
Yeah.
only they believed.
Right.
How do you counsel someone that? What do
Yeah.
you tell them? How
Sure.
does someone find belief?
Yeah, I think you're asking a great question. And a moment ago, when I said only God can do that, I literally meant those words. That was a supernatural event in those 19 guys' lives. But I would answer your question this way. I don't think you find it. I think it's already inside of you. But I need to explain it this way. One of the greatest minds in all of Christianity, a guy by the name of Augustine, the Bishop of Hippo, you may have heard of him as Saint Augustine, said it this way: the soul is restless until a soul finds rest in God. And essentially, what St. Augustine was saying is, God has wired into the human DNA this hole inside our heart. And we try everything on this planet to fill that hole up because we know deep inside there's something missing inside my heart and I don't know what it is and I don't know how to fill it. So we try fame and fortune and we try relationships and all kinds of bad things and all kinds of good things. We try it all. And what St. Augustine is saying is that hole is uniquely created by God and can only be filled by God. So what happens with these 19 guys is the rest of the world, the rest of society, the rest of the guys that were in that room, they are perfectly content trying to find the solution to this hole in their heart by a promotion and a paycheck and a pay raise and lots of success and all of the things that everybody searches for. And then they get to the end of their lives and they say, huh, I did it all and it still didn't fill me up. So, for just a brief moment, God pulls back all of those things that we all realize they're not really filling the hole up. The hole is still there. I'm doing all the things that you can possibly do, but the hole is still there. And I think those 19 guys realize, you know what? Only God can fill this hole up. And I'm going to him and nothing else. And I do believe that all of us have that hole inside of them. It's not all of us that will ultimately get to the point of realizing that hole was created by God, can only be filled by God. And I need to stop trying to fill it up with women or the bottle or a promotion or a fast car or 50 million other, literally 50 million other things that
Yeah,
people use to try to fill it up.
yeah. People have to, I mean, sometimes, a lot of the times, it takes a tragedy. It takes a Damascene moment, right?
Yeah.
Right. It takes a complete mindset shift brought on by something that comes out of left field and you never saw it coming, or
Yeah.
like you said, you you get to a certain place where you've done it all, and every single time you do it, you still don't feel gratified, satisfied, fulfilled, and you wonder, why not? What is the
Yeah.
meaning to it all? And then maybe that's when it comes to you. But Yeah. It's
Historians make, I just interrupt for a second, Lawrence. Historians make this famous quote, and best we know it's true, that Alexander the Great, when he'd conquered literally the entire known world, he stands on a hill looking out at his entire vast empire, and he weeps because there's nothing left to conquer. Literally, I have amassed everything a human being, the only human in history that's ever been able to amass all that I've amassed, and I'm still not full because that hole is God sized and only God is big enough to fill that hole up. Even the entire known world can't fill that hole up. I think Alexander the Great was weeping because his hole could only be filled by God, not by all the vast lands that he's conquered.
Yeah, powerful, powerful. Okay, so then for those that do believe there is an immeasurable bounty and a reward so great it cannot be fully described. However, you give us a sense of what that means in chapter 4, life's greatest treasure. Can you describe what okay, you're in, you, you, you have faith, you believe, you've surrendered. What is life's
Yeah,
greatest
yeah,
treasure?
sure. Really, what the Bible describes happens next is you are adopted. You literally become a member of a new family, and God adopts you into his family. He's the father, you are the son or the daughter. But I just need you to know it doesn't get easier after this. It literally gets harder. Jesus even warned his disciples, hey, they hated and they persecuted me, and they're going to do the exact same thing to you. So please don't be confused and think now that I've settled this, everything gets easier. No, it doesn't get easier. It actually gets harder, but you don't have to do it on your own anymore. Now you have supernatural help when the world gets harder. But the gift, the priceless, unimaginable gift that you get is listen, the guy or the gal that's chasing success and they make it to the top and they're the CEO and they have the corner office and the private parking spot and all of those things. They've got everything that the world could offer and still it doesn't fill the hole up. Or that dude who just signed a $200 million NFL contract and he's literally made it to the height of success in sports, but still the hole is there or any fame, any success, you name it, anything that a human uses to define what a successful life looks like, that hole is still there, except for Christians, because what you get, the grand prize that you get is you get God and you get all of him. You get a little bit of him now, meaning you get the presence of his Holy Spirit right here, right now, who dwells inside of you, never leaves you, never forsakes you. This is a promise from the Bible. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. But you don't get to see me face to face right now. But there is a day coming where you get to see me face to face and you get to spend time with me face to face for the rest of eternity. And the greatest person or the greatest entity in the universe is God, and the greatest gift that God could give is the gift of himself, and God holds nothing back with his children. You get God, the greatest gift that you could possibly get, and you get all of him. You just don't get all of him right now. You give him all of you and you get all of him, and one day you'll be able to experience that face to face in eternity. That's the greatest gift. Listen, let everybody else have the cars and the clothes and the corner office. I don't want it. I want God. I want something much more than that. I want God. I want all of them.
So when you when he radically changes your life, and get and fills your heart finally, right? Fills it to the point where your cup's running over, such that you have to tell other people about it because you have so much in it,
Yeah, right.
right?
How could you possibly sit on news that good?
Right. So uh okay, you surrendered, he's filled you up. How do you explain it to someone who still wonders, and even no doubt, um not someone sitting on the other side of having yet to surrender, but even those who have surrendered, they might struggle with this. um how do how do they know that in surrendering and the Almighty guiding them now, how do they know that what they're doing is right? How do they
Yeah.
know when it comes to those decisions they now have to make that they're being led on the right? Like, what are
Yeah.
the
Right.
right? Like, what are the signs
Sure.
such that, okay, because I've handed it all over now, and so he's guiding me, he's going to guide me. Inevitably, your own mind gets in the way
Right.
of that
Oh, yeah.
because
Yeah.
you've still got to make a proactive decision on something. How does the Holy Spirit, how does that guidance live within you such that you're making the right
Yeah.
decisions?
Sure. And this right here, guys, is where it becomes a beast. It's not easy. And anybody who tells you that it's easy is either doing it wrong or they're a liar, one of the two. Um, so you you totally surrender it all and you get the ultimate prize. You get God and he adopts you into his family. And then that's the moment the war starts. But I want to make sure that you understand, for the listener out there, this war isn't outside of you, it's the war inside of you. And every moment for the rest of your life, now you have to start struggling because inside of you, there is still this innate desire to do what feels right for you, do what's best for you, put yourself first. That's actually breaking the first commandment. You're turning yourself into an idol and you're placing yourself before God. And we all have this inside of us. It is baked into our DNA. It's all because of our first parents, Adam and Eve, that all of us were born with this in every fiber of our being. And so now you have to get up and every day you have to deliberately choose not to do what's best for you, but do what you believe will bring honor to your king. Do what you believe would please your father. And you don't matter very much anymore. He matters. And this is what Jesus meant by saying, anyone who wants to follow me must deny himself, take up his cross, literally crucify yourself, is the kind of language that Jesus is using here. Deny himself, pick up his cross, and follow me. And the way that that original verse is worded, it really appears that he is saying, and follow me every minute of every day. Make this death to self so that I can live for Christ's decision every minute of every day. And I'll just tell you out there, as you're listening to this, the only way that that's humanly possible, the way that you win the war, and I'm describing it as the war within,
Mhm.
the way that you win the war is by surrendering. You wave the white flag and you say, God, I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. I can't deny my flesh and I can't live the life that you want me to live every minute of every day. I'm just not good enough. And he says, I know that. I've known that all along, and I'm not at all ashamed or embarrassed of you. So I'm going to send my Holy Spirit. And if you will listen, but in order to listen, you have to get yourself out of the way so that you can listen to him. If you will listen, my Holy Spirit will help you. And my Holy Spirit will actually do this with you. And in some cases, do it for you. But you have to get yourself out of the way in order for that to happen. And this is a beast. The war never ends. You can be a 97-year-old lady or a 98-year-old man, and you are still fighting that war inside every minute of every day.
Yeah. Wow. It's really, really well said. It resonates. What you're saying resonates, right? Because because now the mind's always working. Does this honor the Father? Does this, it's like,
Yeah.
um, but again, the the the, there's not the payoff is so great, so amazing, and I feel this way. I know I'm pretty sure I've heard you say this before, but it's not even like you have to wait to kingdom come.
That's
Like,
right.
you're already feeling
That's right. Yeah.
the joy, the peace, the solace. So it's not like, oh, there's still a carrot, you're getting nothing in return until we get there. No, 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 no. Your heart is filled now. You're filled with this joy. You're filled with this love. You're alive for the first time ever.
Ever.
Really,
Yeah.
you're really alive now. So it's worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple more questions. You've been so generous with your time, Jeff. So you have the Unbeatable podcast,
Uh-huh.
which helps people build, as you call it, ranger-like resilience. I downloaded the Unbeatable Army Survival Guide. It is, I got to tell you, that could have been a book. I mean, and it's free, but it's packed with such great insight and
Yeah,
information.
thank you.
Wow. I mean, even, it's really powerful if you're going off to war, or if you're in the military, but even if you're not,
Yeah, all of
um,
us are fighting the war inside. Yeah.
exactly. So there's so much good stuff in there. You know, um, what was the inspiration for putting that together?
Yeah. I originally started creating this thing and it went through four different versions before it got to the one that's out there. And you're right, it's free, and I'm happy to make it free. I originally started making this thing early in the war in Afghanistan when we started sending guys back and forth to overseas more than once. And
Okay.
I tried to create something that guys could take with them. And it was in print form and it was small enough that they could fit it in their pocket. And some of them would take a little pocket New Testament with them overseas, but a lot of them just didn't want to read the Bible. And I'm like, look, I chalked this thing full of quotes and things that'll keep you motivated, but there's also a section in I even say it in there, the most important section of the booklet is the section that helps you find peace with God. So I created it and put it in booklet form, paper, printed off and put it in booklet form, small enough that they could put it in their pocket, just so that they would read it on a hillside in Afghanistan, or when they were waiting for the vehicles to roll out of the streets in Iraq, they could pull it out and God would use it to touch their lives. I went through many, many changes in it because it really didn't have the carry the weight that I wanted it to. And the final version that you see that's available now, I've given probably 1 million copies of that away free.
Wow. I could
And
imagine.
no one has ever paid for it. It's been given away free ever since I created it. And it's just designed to help people stay motivated when life is tough, but more importantly, to find the ultimate solution to their problems, which is supernatural help in a relationship with Christ.
Yeah, it really is it's a great book. Again, it's free. I highly recommend that people go to your site and download it. And this leads me into my final question, which is, so one of the things that I believe is that, especially once it's almost like, okay, you know, you also have we're a temple for the Holy Spirit, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
he lives within us. Um, we have to respect this temple, right? It's an old, you can't abuse it any longer, right? Because that
Right.
was part of indulgence, sin, right? And so, hey, we have a responsibility to our people to keep to keep the temple strong, and so we train, we exercise, we keep ourselves strong physically, mentally, and we nourish the soul with the word, so the soul is just as strong, but the temple houses it. So I know you run ultra marathons,
Uh-huh.
so I love
Yeah.
asking about how you're keeping the temple strong. Like
Sure.
what
Yeah.
do because it's important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't even know this question was coming, but I'll just tell for the listeners, I was up at 3:30 this morning, spent a few minutes in the word so I could get the word inside of me. And then I put some heavy weight on my back and started running up and down the hills at 3:30, 4 o'clock this morning. And I did that for quite some time. And I'm a 55-year-old man, and I plan to keep working this body and, taking every fiber of my being and every ounce of my energy and using it for the glory of God. And I really hope, I've said this to my family so many times that they can recite it verbatim. I hope that I drop over dead of a heart attack because I have worn this body out, because this is a tool that God has given me to use for his glory. And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody right now, but I am not going to sit on the couch and eat potatoes and binge Netflix and do nothing for the kingdom. I'm going to put this tool to use, and I'm going to mar this tool and scratch this tool up, and I'm going to wear this tool out. And when it's finally worn out so bad, God can say, you know what, there's nothing left in this guy. Just take him. It's time for him to leave. So I don't think that's supposed to be unique to me. I think that's supposed to be the way that all of us think. Like, God, you've given me my time and energy in my body and my mind for a reason, and I'm going to leverage all of it for you. So I'd rather burn out, to quote a famous Def Leppard song, than fade away. Um, and that's why I work this body as hard as I can so that it's effective tool for God.
I that resonates so much. I feel that. Um, that's what I mean. I've always been driven. I've never been more driven than I am now.
Yeah,
Um, so that I can properly uh,
absolutely.
honor God. Uh, okay, so we got that glimpse. You're up at 3:30. You're running with it. What about nutrition? What's your nutrition like? How do you?
Yeah, I'm very careful about what I eat, when I eat, and how much I eat. And I
Okay,
don't do this for appearances. I do this because you got to feed the machine, right? You got to put some fuel in the car or else it's not going to go anywhere. And if you put bad fuel in there, the engine doesn't perform very well. So I'm pretty particular about 6 meals a day,
okay,
uh, you know, six very small meals a day spread over the course of a very significant, not a significant, but a very regular routine.
okay,
And I use protein to make up for the amount of damage that I'm doing to the muscle cells by the way that I train and by the way that I live. And then I try to be very careful about what I eat, what I drink. Try not to ever overdo it with anything. That includes
okay.
the good stuff. I don't overdo it with coffee. I don't necessarily drink sweets. I don't need any of that stuff because I got to put the right fuel in the engine if I want the engine to perform right. So I'm very particular about what, when, and how much I put in my body.
What kind of protein?
What's that?
What kind of protein? What kind of proteins do you
Yeah,
take?
I normally take an additional meal of whey protein in the middle of the morning and in the middle of the afternoon just to
Okay.
make up for the workouts that I do or the demands of that day, on top of some of the other regular meals that I'm doing that day.
Eggs, beef, chicken,
Yeah, yeah, all of the I work my meals around good healthy proteins.
and then carbs. What about
Yes.
carbs?
Yeah, well, so I'm not a guy that avoids carbs, but I'm
Okay.
also not a guy that tries to burn nothing but carbs. It's a great source of energy, but it's also really, really hard for carbs to break down and become a fuel source. So I try to have a balanced, healthy diet. And I also try not to take a lot of vitamins and supplements because I found if you take enough vegetables and fruit and eating, the right kinds of meat, the right kinds of natural foods, then you're going to get almost all of the, vitamins and supplements that you need. Just most people who have a physically demanding lifestyle don't are not able to consume the amount of protein that they need in regular meals.
Right.
So I supplement with protein in the middle of the morning and middle of the afternoon. I'll go take a
Okay.
protein shake right after this conversation.
So for the most part, the diet is uh, meat, uh, protein shakes, fruit and vegetables. Is that
Fruits and vegetables. Yep, that's basically it. And water. I drink a cup of coffee in the morning and then water. And that's it.
and are you still going to be? Are you still running ultra marathons?
Yeah, I've got a 100K race coming up at the end of this year. That's one of the reasons why I was going up and down the hills today with some weights on my back because it's in the mountains, and it's
Oh,
all off roads. And so I'm trying to get the legs ready for that. But I just
okay.
had the privilege of a lifetime and just had a chance to finish the Comrades Ultra Marathon called the Comrades Marathon down in South Africa, the world's oldest and by
Wow.
far the world's biggest ultra. And that was one of the best experiences of my life doing Comrades this summer.
So you training with Goggins at this?
Yeah, man, I love it. I love running.
Amazing, amazing. Jeff, thank you so much for all of this insight, for all of your thoughts and ideas on these subjects. You are a tremendous inspiration. Where can others get some of this advice, some of this ministry,
Yeah,
some
sure.
of what you have to offer?
Yeah, you can find me at jeffstruecker.com, or if you're interested in that free download that we talked about, you can get that at unbeatablearmy.com. That's the people that kind of follow me online, the Unbeatable Army. So just go to unbeatablearmy.com if you want that free PDF download.
Amazing, amazing. Jeff, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. You're a blessing.
Thanks, Lawrence. It's been great talking to you.
All right. Alpha Human Podcast, we're out. Okay, there it is. So that was awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, sure. And by the way, if you want to let me know when this thing is about to
Yes.
release, I'll try to share it out on social media.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. We'll probably have it released probably within the next few days, certainly by the beginning of next week. So I'll definitely alert you to it. I'll send you an email.
Yeah.
And yeah, just really appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks. All right,
God
buddy.
bless you. God bless you.
Great talking to you. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.